What if the very reason you felt distant, quiet, or out of place wasn't a flaw, but a sign of awakening? Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he didn't warn us that in doing so, we might lose the world we once knew. Friends begin to fade, conversations feel hollow, the gatherings that once felt alive now feel energetically suffocating, and in that strange silence, something deeper begins to stir. This isn't about being antisocial. It's about vibrating out of the illusion, because once consciousness expands, you no longer fit in, you tune in. You start sensing energy, not just words. You start craving truth, not chatter. And what the world calls withdrawal is really a sacred return. A return to self, to source, to stillness. In this video, we're going to explore exactly why spiritually awake people often pull away from society, and why that is not a dysfunction, but a divine transition. Through the lens of Carl Jung and the echoes of ancient wisdom, we'll uncover the hidden purpose behind your solitude and the power it holds. So if you felt like you're drifting away from the world, maybe you're not drifting, maybe you're ascending. When someone undergoes a spiritual awakening, it's not just a gentle realization, it's a tectonic shift in consciousness. The very lens through which they perceive reality begins to crack open. What once seemed important, status, appearances, idle conversation, starts to feel hollow. This isn't a judgment, it's a resonance issue. Their frequency begins to rise, and with it, the world they once participated in begins to feel foreign. It's not that they're better, it's that they're different now, aligned with a deeper truth, and that difference can feel like an existential chasm between them and others. Carl Jung understood this as individuation, the process of becoming whole. But to become whole, the seeker must detach from the collective illusions. The persona, that social mask everyone wears, begins to fall away. And with its fall, the awakened one can no longer play the game of surface-level interaction. They crave depth, truth, and meaning, not because they are elitist or aloof, but because their soul is starving for something real, something sacred, something that typical social scene rarely provides. They begin to feel the vibration of words. They notice when people speak without presence. They sense when a room is filled with unspoken tensions, hidden motives, or performative energy. This heightened awareness isn't always a gift. It can feel like emotional hypersensitivity. It becomes energetically taxing to stay in spaces where everyone is pretending. So they withdraw, not out of contempt, but as an act of energetic self-preservation. This is where the myth of the antisocial spiritual person emerges. It's not that they don't love people. Quite the opposite, they love deeply. But the awakened soul values authentic connection, not noisy proximity. They'd rather sit in silence with someone fully present than engage in endless small talk with someone who isn't even truly there. That's not antisocial, that's awakened discernment. And so, the inner shift leads outward to a life rearranged by alignment. Social circles dissolve, conversations become sacred exchanges, and the need for constant interaction fades, replaced by a deeper communion with self, source, and silence. This is the beginning of the hermit's path, not one of loneliness, but of liberation. Carl Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For the spiritually awake, this confrontation with the shadow is not optional, it's inevitable. They begin to perceive not only the light of their own divinity, but also the deeply buried fears, traumas, and unconscious patterns, both personal and collective. Most people spend their lives avoiding this shadow, but the awakened, they walk straight into it, and that changes everything. This shadow work isn't glamorous, it's raw, it's painful, but it's also liberating. Once the veils are lifted and the inner world is illuminated, the awakened being starts to notice how much of society operates in denial. They see the masks people wear, the passive aggression hidden behind politeness, the self-abandonment disguised as ambition, the numbing routines mistaken for success, and it's heartbreaking because they remember being there too, blind, asleep, playing roles to feel accepted. When you begin to see clearly, you can't unsee. Social interactions that once felt normal begin to feel like theater. The small talk becomes noise. The gossip becomes spiritual poison. The energy of inauthenticity, once tolerated, now feels suffocating. This is not judgment, it's clarity. The awakened soul doesn't see themselves as better, but they do see more. And that awareness makes traditional socializing feel energetically dissonant. Jung believed that the collective unconscious influences every interaction. So when an awakened person engages with someone deeply embedded in their persona, the interaction is subtly governed by projections. The unawakened person may unknowingly project their shadow onto the awakened, sensing discomfort without knowing why. The result? Tension, misunderstanding, emotional misfires. This creates a growing desire in the awakened soul to retreat, not out of fear, but out of peace. And so, they seek fewer but deeper connections. They long for spaces where shadow work isn't feared but welcomed, where darkness is not shamed but integrated, where silence is safe and truth is sacred. Until then, they choose solitude, not because they are broken, but because they are becoming whole. Once spiritual awakening occurs, the entire nervous system becomes a more refined instrument. Thoughts feel louder, emotions feel deeper. The energy in a room becomes unmistakable. This isn't imaginary, it's vibrational physics. The awakened being has tuned into a higher frequency, and in that tuning, superficiality becomes jarring. Small talk, once a social lubricant, now feels like static interrupting a sacred signal. It's not that they can't engage, it's that doing so feels like spiritual dissonance. Imagine trying to play a symphony on a radio that only broadcasts commercials. That's what shallow conversation feels like to an energetically attuned soul. They're not being arrogant when they withdraw. They're protecting their field. They're conserving the precious life force energy that now flows more consciously through them. And small talk? It's a leak, a frequency mismatch, a distraction from the presence they've learned to honor. Science supports this. Heart-brain coherence, as explored by Greg Braden, shows how emotions carry frequency. When an awakened person engages in an interaction devoid of authenticity, their body responds. Tight chest, spiked cortisol, fatigue. The body literally begins to reject the environment. It's not rudeness, it's biology meeting soul evolution. Their system is recalibrating toward truth, and anything false becomes intolerable. People often misinterpret this as introversion or social anxiety, but it's deeper. It's energetic discernment. The awakened individual can often sense the emotion behind the words, fear masked as confidence, sadness hiding beneath a smile, anger cloaked in sarcasm. This level of sensitivity, while powerful, makes everyday social settings feel overwhelming or draining. So instead of endless mingling, they seek resonance. They crave depth, stillness, or soulful dialogue. They want conversations that touch on the mystery of being alive, not just the weather. They want communion, not chit-chat. And when that can't be found, they choose silence, not as an escape, but as a sacred alignment with their new vibration. In Jungian psychology, the archetype of the hermit isn't just a recluse. It's the soul in retreat, seeking higher wisdom beyond the noise of the world. When someone spiritually awakens, this archetype begins to stir deep within. The soul craves solitude not out of isolation, but initiation. Silence becomes the temple where divine truths are heard. And so, the awakened person steps back, not to disconnect, but to reconnect on a higher level. This isn't the loneliness of the wounded. It's the sacred solitude of the seeker. The hermit isn't running from the world. He's journeying inward, carrying a lantern lit by inner knowing. In tarot, the hermit holds a staff for stability and a light to guide others, not by preaching, but by embodying the path. And that's exactly what spiritually awakened people begin to do. They become living lighthouses. But first, they must retreat from the shore. Carl Jung recognized that individuation, the process of becoming whole, often demands a descent into solitude. This phase, though painful for the ego, is essential for the soul. Without the distractions of constant interaction, the awakened being begins to hear the whispers of the subconscious, the teachings of dreams, the call of the higher self. This is where transformation truly begins, in the dark, in the quiet, alone. In a society addicted to stimulation, the hermit is often misunderstood. They're seen as antisocial, withdrawn, or odd. But what they're really doing is preserving their energy, refining their essence, and accessing realms of inner knowledge unavailable in noisy crowds. They're not avoiding life, they're preparing to live it more fully, from the soul. And eventually the hermit returns, but changed, grounded, clear, magnetic. They bring with them the insights gathered in silence, the power earned in isolation. They no longer socialize for validation. They connect for purpose. Their presence carries depth, and their words cut through illusion. They no longer fear solitude, because they've met themselves there and found the divine within. As one's consciousness expands, the fabric of society begins to look different, almost like waking up from a dream while everyone else is still asleep inside it. The spiritually awakened start seeing the underlying programming in social structures, the need to please, to perform, to belong at any cost. They see how people speak but don't say what they mean, smile but hide sorrow, achieve success yet feel empty. It's not cynicism, it's perception sharpened by awakening. And what they see often hurts. Carl Jung warned about the danger of the collective persona, a shared illusion we all contribute to and get trapped in. Society rewards conformity, not consciousness. It praises repetition, not reflection. So when someone starts breaking free from that matrix, they no longer resonate with the scripts most people follow. It's not rebellion, it's liberation. And that liberation often feels like alienation, because the system no longer fits who they are becoming. In social spaces, this misalignment becomes obvious. Conversations revolve around consumption, comparison, and external validation. The spiritually awakened being feels like they're wearing someone else's skin in these settings. Uncomfortable, tight, not quite right. And so they retreat, not because they lack social skills, but because the frequency of those environments stifles their truth. Bruce Lipton's work in epigenetics and belief systems adds depth here. The awakened person has reprogrammed their inner world. They've shifted their vibration, but the social world hasn't caught up. So there's a clash between the awakened individual who sees reality as energy and the collective that still worships form, between the soul that seeks depth and the world addicted to surface. This is why so many awakened people feel like outsiders, not because they don't care about others, but because they care too much to pretend. They yearn for spaces where they can be fully themselves without masks, where truth isn't threatening, and where presence is valued more than performance. Until those spaces appear, they keep walking alone, not bitterly but bravely, walking not away from others, but towards something more real. There is a sacred distinction that few understand until they awaken: the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Carl Jung wrote that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from not being able to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. For the spiritually awake, this realization hits hard. They are surrounded by people yet often feel unseen, not because they are invisible, but because their inner world no longer matches the outer. Loneliness is the ache of separation. It's the hunger for connection that feels impossible to satisfy. But aloneness, that is something entirely different. Aloneness is wholeness. It's the state of being complete within oneself, no longer fragmented by the need for constant approval or stimulation. And the awakened soul learns to embrace this aloneness not as a punishment, but as a portal to personal power. In the early stages of awakening, the line between the two can feel blurry. One may long for others who understand, who see, who feel the world the same way. But as they evolve, they begin to realize true connection starts within. The deeper their relationship with their own soul, the less desperate they become for external affirmation. The void, once filled by noise and distraction, now becomes a womb of rebirth, a sacred space where higher truths can emerge. Jung saw this path as essential for individuation. Only in aloneness can one integrate the self. Only in solitude can the many inner voices be reconciled into one clear knowing. And this knowing carries power, the kind of grounded clarity that no crowd can offer. The spiritually awake are not avoiding connection. They are cultivating deeper connection with truth before returning to the world. So while the unawakened fear being alone, the awakened eventually crave it, not out of misanthropy, but because they've tasted the stillness where the divine speaks. In that stillness, the illusion of separation dissolves. They are no longer alone, they are all one. And from that space, even a single word can hold galaxies of connection. There comes a point in the awakening journey when silence begins to say more than words ever could. It's not just a preference, it's a recognition. Words, once a tool for connection, begin to feel like a veil. So much of everyday speech becomes performative, superficial, or transactional, but silence that carries presence. And presence is the new language of the awakened. Carl Jung often emphasized the power of the unconscious, how most communication happens beneath the words. The spiritually awakened begin to sense this on an energetic level. They feel when someone's words don't align with their vibration. They hear the unsaid more loudly than what's spoken, and in that gap, they discover the sacred honesty of silence. It's not empty, it's full of truth. In silence, there's nowhere to hide, no performance, no masks, no pretending, just pure being. And for the awakened soul, this purity is healing. They begin to crave environments where nothing needs to be said to be felt, where eye contact carries meaning, where presence replaces performance, where stillness is a conversation with the divine. This is why awakened people often withdraw from noise. Not just literal sound, but vibrational noise. The gossip, the complaining, the posturing. It becomes energetically loud and mentally exhausting. Silence, by contrast, is like stepping into a sanctuary, a reset, a recalibration to their natural state of coherence and peace. So when they don't speak much, it's not because they have nothing to say. It's because they've learned that the deepest truths are felt, not said. They're not being cold. They're being clear. They're choosing energetic honesty over verbal performance, and they're inviting others into a deeper kind of communication, one beyond language, one where the soul speaks directly. As the awakened individual journeys through solitude, shadow, silence, and energetic discernment, a mysterious transformation occurs. What once felt like isolation begins to feel like initiation. The quiet becomes sacred. The retreat becomes intentional, and the once lonely soul steps into the archetype of the mystic, not as a title, but as a lived truth. They no longer avoid the world, but walk through it differently, silently, powerfully, with purpose. Carl Jung believed that the mystic is someone who dives into the unconscious, faces its monsters, and emerges with treasures of insight. This is what the spiritually awake have been doing all along, alchemizing pain into wisdom, solitude into strength, and disconnection into divine intimacy. The same solitude that once hurt now heals. It becomes a crucible where ego dissolves and essence shines. The mystic doesn't need the spotlight. They don't crave followers or validation. They walk the edges of society, carrying frequencies most can't name but instantly feel. Their presence is medicine, and their silence speaks volumes. They're not here to entertain, they're here to remind, to awaken, to mirror back the truths people have forgotten. And often, that kind of presence can only be forged in the fires of isolation. When spiritually awake, people stop trying to fit in. They begin to stand out, but not by force, by frequency. They become living transmissions of a new way of being, grounded, aware, energetically sovereign. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. They're not above others. They've just remembered who they are beneath the conditioning. So if you're one of them, if you've withdrawn, lost interest in social scenes, and chosen depth over distraction, know this: you are not broken. You are becoming whole. You are not lost. You are returning, not just to yourself, but to your purpose. And when the time is right, you'll speak, you'll teach, you'll transmit. But until then, let the silence refine you. Let the solitude awaken you. You're not disappearing, you're becoming. If the world feels heavier now, if conversations seem emptier, if solitude has become your sanctuary, know this: you are not breaking down. You are breaking through. There is a sacred loneliness that visits those on the path of awakening, not to punish, but to purify. To pull you away from noise, so you can hear the signal of your soul. To separate you from illusion, so you can remember your origin. You are not meant to dim yourself to fit in. You are meant to vibrate so high that you call others to rise. Carl Jung understood this deeply. Individuation requires separation, and that separation is not exile, it is evolution. You are becoming sovereign in your energy, fluent in silence, and devoted to truth. That is the path of the mystic, the seer, the awakened one. So don't fear the distance between you and others. Celebrate the closeness between you and your soul. And if this message stirred something inside you, let it be known. Like this video, subscribe to the Cosmic Awakening channel, because this is more than content. It's a signal, a reminder, a space for those who feel deeply and see clearly. You are not alone on this path. You are just ahead.